Hello, Cassie Harriet here from Charlotte County Libraries and History, specifically the Punta Gorda Charlotte Library branch. And I am here with...
I'm Spencer Pullen, and I work at the same branch as well.
And we are here to talk about cameras. I was taught on a film camera many moons ago, and I have a digital camera now, and Spencer is going to talk about ISO and the relationship to f-stop and lighting and all that good stuff. Correct?
That's correct. And everybody that's came up maybe shooting film, the good news is all the principles are still the same. It's just instead of shooting on film, we're shooting on a digital sensor. So if you retained any of that stuff, or if it's been a while, good news is it's all the same. But yeah, what we're going to talk about today specifically is ISO. And some of you, if you've shot film in the past, you might have also heard the term ASA. That's kind of the same thing. And basically what we're talking about is the ability of the sensor or the film back in the day, its ability to accept light. And it's usually in a scale from say 100 to 6400, or it can even go higher than that.
Wow.
So depending upon your shooting condition, you might have to adjust your ISO. Mm-hmm. So for example, if we were shooting maybe some tabletop subjects, something like that, where you're going to be on a tripod, then you can easily get away with ISO 100. If, say for example, you've got family that might be running around a park and they're going to get on the swings and things like that, so you're kind of running and gunning it, then you might need a higher ISO, maybe around 800 or so, depending upon if you need to freeze the action. Birds in flight, you might need a little bit higher ISO than that. When the sun goes down, then that's when you really have to start raising your ISO to the 1600, 3200, 6400. So that way, specifically if you can hand hold, so you get a sharp image.
That explains why so many of my bird pictures are blurry. Yes.
Yeah, like I say, when you're panning, and especially if the bird's moving at a certain speed, it can be difficult. Or if you've ever shot, like for example, one of the places that I used to like to shoot a lot at is at the South Jetty up in Venice during the winter time, because that is when all the surfers come out.
Oh.
So if you want to get some really cool surfing shots, if you're around the Venice area, that's a really great place to go. But those guys are moving all over on their boards, so to get a fast shutter speed to freeze the action, you're going to need a higher ISO. So I've shot them anywhere from, we'll say, around 800 ISO. Sometimes if you get a lot of light, like if it's in the middle of the day, then you can get away with 400.
Oh. Does that give a better clarity to the picture, or?
Well, that's the thing with ISO, is the higher you go up the scale, the more noise that you can get. If anybody ever shot high-speed film back in the day, I know my parents, sometimes they would shoot 1000 speed film, and it looked kind of like a snowstorm on it. So there's a trade-off of getting a sharp photo, but having it look kind of grainy in a way, or noisy in this case.
That's why you want to have those close-up pictures of items that aren't running around at the lower ISO.
Correct.
That makes sense, folks.
Yeah, and the higher you also go up the scale, you also start to lose what's called dynamic range, which is the camera's ability to see details in the shadow and the highlight area. So if you're down around ISO 100, you're going to have a lot more dynamic range, so the camera can separate highlights and shadows, versus say ISO 1600, where that gap really starts to come together and you might lose some of the detail in your photo.
Very cool. Now, what would you shoot this area in if you were taking just some nature photos? What ISO would you choose?
And I tell folks that, you know, if you're out just walking around, you don't have a tripod and you just want to keep it easy, usually ISO 400 is a good one to start with. It's kind of like middle of the road. That's if you have a lot of light. So like right now, we're actually at the History Park here in Punta Gorda, and it's later afternoon. So we do have pockets of full sun, which would be very easy to shoot that 400 ISO. If we were going to try and shoot maybe a detail shot of a flower or a plant in the shade, then we might have to raise our ISO to maybe 800 1600, somewhere in there. So it also depends. Everybody's got a certain shakiness to them.
Yes.
So if you're more shaky than somebody else, you might need a little higher ISO. If you're a little bit more steady, then you can get away with something a little lower.
Depends on how much coffee I've had.
Yeah, you might want to get, break off the latte on that done when you're going to go out shooting. But yeah, and so that's just some things to think about. And also, if you're shopping for a new camera, we're not here to sell you anything, but if you happen to be in the market for upgrading or buying maybe your first camera, something to think about is there's different sensors in these, and some are what they call APC, which is a little smaller sensor, and then they have what's called a full frame sensor. And the full frame sensor is the same size as what a 35 millimeter frame of film used to be. So that's where the full frame name actually comes from. And by having that bigger sensor, then that allows you to have a higher ISO with that less noise, less grain. So that's really nice. So why doesn't everybody have a full frame camera? It takes different lenses for those types of cameras, and they're a little bit more expensive. They're not as affordable as some of the smaller ones.
So I'm thinking this is not full frame.
That one in particular is not full frame, and neither is this one. This is a nice DSLR. This one has
That's
to be
nice
from
camera.
Nikon. It's a great camera. You have a Canon, which is another great camera. In fact, we're actually shooting this video with Kathy's exact same camera, so it gives us great image quality, even though it's a crop sensor. So I would definitely recommend that one if you're looking for something that's all around. But that's another term where you hear full frame versus crop, is when it comes into that play is ISO and how much noise. Basically, if you're going to be shooting a lot of low light, so if you're going to be walking around, maybe you're going to be visiting different cities around the US, and at night, and you want to take handheld, you want to take pictures, then you might want to consider a full frame camera.
Okay.
If you're simply because then you'll be hand holding and you'll need higher ISO.
Okay.
But if your main, say you're a landscape photographer and you're always going to be on a tripod, then any camera will work for you, because you're going to have the camera's going to be stable on that platform. And then
So
you
like,
can shoot at ISO 100 all the time.
set this down on the table and I could just shoot ISO 100. What about the wind? The wind blowing.
So that's another great question. Yeah, we do have a little bit of wind here today, so
Feels so good.
so even though the camera or we have everything locked down on a tripod, if your subject is moving, then you might need to raise your ISO to help freeze that subject a little bit as it's swaying in the wind. Even with birds in flight, they make special tripods that you can put your camera on and then you can swing them. They're called gimbals. Again, that might be another situation where we're going to need to raise your ISO, so that way you can get that sharp shot. But yeah, definitely just take account if it's windy. Down here in Florida, it seems like during the winter time the wind starts to kick up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that's where you might just need to be cognizant of whatever it is you're shooting. And if you're shooting macro photography, so now we're talking like little subjects, could be the
Ants.
stamens of ants. We got a lot of those around here. Stamen of a flower, something like that, ladybugs, and you want to make them larger than life, then you're going to need probably a little higher ISO if you're not on a tripod.
Now, does this apply also to people who just take their pictures with their phone?
So yeah, so if you're going to shoot with your cell phone, which obviously these are very popular, something to think about is these actually have smaller sensors in them than what's in regular DSLR or even a mirrorless camera. So it's not so much you have to worry so much about playing with the ISO on them, and some of them they don't allow you to natively go in and start playing with those functions. But there are apps that you can download and then you can go in and start taking more control over your phone's camera.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's something to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I take a lot of pictures with my phone.
Yeah.
And that's why, I see a lot of people taking pictures with their phones, not even carrying a camera. If you go to Disney, you'll see people walking around with their iPads. I'm like, really? You're gonna walk around with your iPad? But whatever, float your boat. This is much smaller than an iPad.
And speaking about why would you want something like a camera like this over something that fits in your pocket, This we can put lenses on. The image quality, definitely when you're zooming out, it's going to be a whole lot better. The old pinch and zoom, I know Apple's got like 3 lenses now, maybe 4 lenses coming out on the newer phones that allow you to get wide angle and telephoto. But if really photography is really going to be your hobby, then eventually you might grow into getting a one of those crop frame cameras. They're very affordable. You know, I always see, depending upon when you watch this, Black Friday is always coming around. So with Black Friday, you'll find the camera manufacturers have deep discounts on everything. So that would be the great time to get what they call a kit, where you get the camera, and generally you get a couple of lenses, a battery, and some camera cards, and it's fairly affordable, actually.
Yeah, I've seen some good deals.
Yeah. So like this camera here from Nikon, I just happen to have it. Came with a wide angle and a telephoto lens. Comes with a camera card and battery for about less than $500.
That's a good deal.
So you can really get anything that you want. And the thing I always tell people is, we're talking about photography in general. This is a tool for the photographer to get the image. It's kind of like going to a painter and saying, that's a beautiful painting that you've made. You must have a very expensive paintbrush. So it's always whoever's crafted that image. I've got friends that have images in National Geographic and they shot them with this. So it's not impossible. It's all about light. It's all about composition. Going way back to the basics, which we'll talk about that in another video. Composition and lighting, all that kind of good stuff. But we're just getting started with ISO today.
Sounds really good. And you've already taught me some stuff today while we were prepping for this. So he's really good. Now, if you were doing, like you said, landscape photography, like a panoramic, what would be a good ISO for doing a panoramic, like where if you were going boom, 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 boom?
So yeah, so if you're hand holding and you're going click, 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 then I'd say go with a 400, as long as there's a lot of light out. If it's sunset, if it's maybe after sunset, what they call the golden hour,
yes,
then you get into the blue hour, then you're definitely going to want to crank up the ISO. But if you're on location and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you got a lot of light, you could definitely get away with 100, 200 ISO.
I got a good one for you.
Okay.
Fireworks.
Oh, fireworks.
I can't get a good firework picture to save my life.
So yeah, so what I've shot fireworks with, believe it or not, is, if you think about it, fireworks is kind of like a daytime exposure in a way. So what I've shot fireworks, even though they're there at night, what are we actually photographing? We're not photographing the sky. We're actually photographing
the light.
I call them the little flowers that explode and then they make the neat little trails. So something like that, I would definitely maybe start with ISO 400 and have your camera on a tripod. That's really going to help you. If you're at a place where tripods are not really allowed, then obviously crank the ISO up to like 1600, somewhere around there. Maybe you might have to go even higher than that. But I've gotten some really great pictures of fireworks.
Not
by
me.
simply that we can do a whole video just on fireworks and how to set that up, but maybe we'll do that
something for another day.
Yeah, exactly. But it can be done. So there's lots of things that you can definitely come up with.
Very good.
Okay, so something that you can do if you want to start working with ISO on your camera is, a lot of people, they use what I call the green square, or it says automatic. On this particular Nikon, it's green, it says auto. I think on the Canon you've got the green box that says A on it. So that's the automatic mode, which a lot of people start out on. You just put it on that, you click the button, it takes a photo, and you got your result. Now, if you want to kind of start to take a little bit of control of your camera, but you don't want to get into shutter speed and aperture and all that stuff yet, we're going to talk about that in future episodes. You can put your camera to the P mode. P is for professional.
Oh, I did not know that.
I'm testing her. No, P is actually for program, not for professional. So once you put it on P for program, then you can choose the ISO that you want. So for example, like it's kind of getting later afternoon here, so we might, maybe 400 just to make it easy. Then the camera is going to choose the shutter speed and the aperture. So you've only got to think about one of the 3 parts. of the exposure triangle. We won't get into that today, but so basically just leave it on P. Also, another side note about shooting program is if you've ever gone into your menu on your camera and some of the menu items are grayed out and you're like, you want to access that, then that's a great time to put it in P, and then you can make your changes there.
Oh,
but
I
when you
was
put it
wondering
back
about that.
to automatic, it's going to gray out those menus again. So leave it in program to get started.
Okay.
But that's kind of a neat way to get
I've
to
never
get
used
going.
program. I've been an automatic girl.
Okay. Well, that's where we all generally started. So nothing wrong with that.
Okay, we talked about fireworks and how to get those nice fireworks shots. How about full moon? You look up at the sky, you see that moon, you want to get a picture of it and remember that. How do you do that?
So yeah, so if you've ever tried shooting the moon on an automatic setting on your camera, generally what you get is a black frame with a white ball. And unfortunately, the camera gets very confused because it sees all that black sky, and it's trying to expose mainly for that. So this is one of those times where you're going to want to put your camera in manual mode. And the trick is, even though we're shooting the image down here on Earth and it's nighttime, it's actually daytime on the moon. So you actually have to use your daylight settings. Just to give you a quick idea off the top of my head would be ISO 100, around f16 at 1/100th, 1/60th of a second. And then what you actually get is you'll actually get the craters and the mountains and everything on the moon. You'll actually get all the little detail that's supposed to be there. So it's kind of a little, but we can definitely go over that when we get to
I'll
talk
have
about
to
manual.
try that one, yeah. Because I've got many pictures of that big white ball with the black background. So
Yeah.
I think I'll be able to improve upon that with your assistance.
No worries. That sounds like another video that we can do. So thanks for joining me and Kathy today. Hopefully you found some value in this. This is all part of the Punta Gorda Photography Club. Kathy and I are both on the chair for that. So we're trying to come up with great content for you. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you have any suggestions, you can always leave us a comment or suggestion below.
Yes.
And we appreciate you taking the time to watch it.
Thanks. We'll see you soon.